And since I've gotten Sora, I will say that I feel this genuine childlike creativity kind of reawakened in me, where I'm getting to explore ideas that have just been sitting in a vault because who's going to give me the money or resources to kind of like explore some stupid ideas that I had. But it's so fun and invigorating to do it.
With the golden ticket to test out OpenAI's Sora, Nik Kleverov joins Creativity Squared to discuss his experience with the text-to-video tool and the childlike creativity it unleashed in him. Nik is not only an Emmy-grade storyteller, but is also an immigrant and the son of a nonconformist artist who the Soviet government persecuted. Nik's life story and varied experiences inform his diverse approach to creative work, from exploratory use of AI within storytelling to design-led title sequence work and live-action commercials. He's won numerous advertising and creative industry awards as a creative director. As an entrepreneur and executive, he has started and operated successful and innovative business enterprises, including Native Foreign. He's the co-founder and chief creative officer at the woman-owned creative agency production company Hybrid, based in LA, that's worked with OpenAI on different projects. I first connected with Nik through Chad Nelson, who's been a guest on the show to discuss the first ever animated short film that was 100% designed using AI visuals with DALL-E. Nik and Chad collaborated on the groundbreaking short. Today, you'll hear Nik's experience working with Sora in addition to other text-to-video tools. Nik's perspective is informed by working with clients on commercials, as a filmmaker, and on a team creating original IP. Nik also shares an agency owner's perspective, discussing why Native Foreign is going all in as next-gen creatives and establishing an AI labs division within the agency. Tune in to hear about one of Nik's creative projects he got out of his vault to bring to life and how it will evolve as Gen AI video does as well. He dives into the creative process, the ever-changing AI landscape, and the paradigm shift underway in the advertising industry. Artists need to be part of the development of AI tools, and this is your chance to hear what Nik is sharing with OpenAI related to Sora and how you can stay ahead of the curve with AI and storytelling. Enjoy.
Have you ever thought, what if this is all just a dream?
Welcome to Creativity Squared. Discover how creatives are collaborating with artificial intelligence in your inbox, on YouTube, and on your preferred podcast platform. Hi, I'm Helen Todd, your host, and I'm so excited to have you join the weekly conversations I'm having with amazing pioneers in the space. The intention of these conversations is to ignite our collective imagination at the intersection of AI and creativity to envision a world where artists thrive. Nik, welcome to Creativity Squared. It's so good to have you on the show.
Hey, Helen, how are you?
I am good. We've actually got to meet in person twice, first at the Tribeca Film Festival and then at South by Southwest this past March. So it's so wonderful to have you on the show.
Yes, likewise. Thank you.
Oh, and how we first got connected was through Chad Nelson, because you collaborated with him on Critters. And goodness, I think that was like episode 3. It was right after Critters had come out. And I think I said congrats on Instagram to Chad, and he replied. I was like, oh, would you be open to being on the podcast? And, fast forward, here we are almost a year later. But for those who are meeting you for the first time, can you introduce yourself and a bit about your origin story? And then we'll dive into the foray with AI and Critters and go from there.
Yes, I'm Nik Kleverov. I'm the Chief Creative Officer and co-founder of Native Foreign. We're a creative agency production company hybrid here in Los Angeles, California. I come from a line of filmmaking and all sorts of creative, including design. I worked on a lot of notable main title sequences, including Narcos and Bloodline and several others. So we have a bit of an ethos at our agency to bring a high level of design and integrity into our work. We are primarily brand work, but we are also in the entertainment side, and we have a long-term goal of creating IP.
Amazing. And I also saw, which I didn't know when we first met, that you're have a WeBank status because it's a women owned as well. So I didn't know if you wanted to plug that as
It
well.
is. Yes, we are officially a women-owned business. My partner Rebecca is at the helm of this. She started the company, and I actually came on board after. So we have an initiative to, employ and support the work of female and diverse artists and creatives all over the world, and it's honestly just such an honor.
As a female founder, I always love to hear that and other businesses that support diverse voices in all forms.
There was a big conference that Rebecca just went to in Denver. I don't know if you've heard of it, but they do, I think, like an annual conference and all sorts of different events that are really cool. And I think some of them you can go to even if you aren't WeBank yet. If you're aspiring or you just want to connect with like other female founders and female executives and stuff like that. So I haven't been, but I heard that it's great and you should check it out.
It's on my list. The application process is very long, so
No
maybe
kidding.
when I take a break from the podcast, I will actually get to filling out all the application work.
For sure.
Well, since you are one of the very special few who have gotten access to Sora and the text to video, which is all the hot news in I want to dive into that. But let's start with how the relationship initially started, and that was with Critters. And for those who haven't heard about Critters before, can you introduce that project and kind of your relationship with OpenAI as well to kind of set the stage?
Yeah. So Critters is actually the first animated short film that is 100% designed using AI generated visuals with Dolly. At the time, nobody had done it. And Chad, who's been a friend now for quite a while, was kicking around some ideas. And, he talked to me about this kind of world. And he was one of the first Dolly users. He brought me into that. I got a chance to play around with stuff, but Chad's a really creative and industrious guy. So he created this world of like forest critters and started kicking around the idea of like a story and who these kind of critters are. And the point of the whole critter story is that everybody has assumptions about who someone is, but deep down inside, we're very deep and layered, and the critters are a representation of people. And so the kind of short, the way that it goes, and you can watch the short critters with a Z dot TV. The way that the short is, and the way we kind of pitched it is, it's a David Attenborough Planet Earth style film that clashes into a Monty Python sketch. So we wanted to highlight and show off the beautiful visuals that were possible with AI tools. Back in the Stone Ages of 22 with Jolly, too, is when we were creating these things. And you're kind of going through this, and we brought the images to life with very traditional means, meaning like we rotoed everything, we separated all the layers, we used in painting and out painting to add stuff in, and then we kind of like created the Z depth, and then we hooked up the characters to Unreal Engine and had their like mouths moving and stuff. But anyway, you're going through this beautiful world. You're seeing these wonderful critters that were kind of created with AI. I put in quotes because just like anything, it was an iterative process that I think there might be misconceptions about AI that you press a button and it's done. But I mean, there was like hundreds of iterations of each character fixing limbs or eyes or things until like they were exactly the way that Chad envisioned them. And we're going through this beautiful world, and then the critters all start talking back to this omniscient narrator. And so they're like, that's actually all wrong. And this like ferocious red spider is actually named Blue the red spider. And everybody has their own stories and their own things. And so I think it picked up some steam. It got us a lot of press. I went into like many film festivals. I think we're up to like 16 or 18 now. But I think it was a little different than a lot of the AI stuff that was coming out at that time, which was also very like tech demo-y feeling. It wasn't storytelling in that traditional sense. Funny enough, I still feel like there aren't that many things like Critters out there. A lot of the kind of AI films I see are definitely still more on like the artsy side, and there are certainly the capabilities and tools to be doing more storytelling. With each day that passes. But anyway, so after we pitched Critters to Open and got basically a small grant to create it, that created a relationship with us and them. Open actually hired Native Foreign for a couple things. One of them, probably the most notable one, was this Dev Day film. So they had their first annual Dev Day, which is their keynote. So at the top of it, I believe right before Sam came out, there was a film that played, and the film was a bit of a Chat GPT retrospective. So I interviewed hundreds of people all over the world and just about their experience with Chat GPT in its first year. Because the timing of it, Chat had just been out for right about a year. And all walks of life, all different types of people, with this kind of common unifying thing that, in a sense, it helps you enjoy more time to be human, which I think was the thesis and kind of what I discovered from just naturally talking to all these people. And so we put together a little poignant film that played at the top of it. But anyway, I think it was a mixture of things, and our kind of relationship with them and doing some of those creative projects together that got me the invite to Sora, which I'm extremely grateful for every day because it's been a blast.
Yeah, that's amazing. And congratulations on the, I mean, I know I follow you on LinkedIn and Instagram, and it seems like, yeah, you guys were in Cannes and we saw each other at Tribeca, but yeah, it seemed like a very amazing year just in getting to do the festival circuit with the film. And it was really nice. Getting to watch it on a big screen at the Tribeca Film Festival because the quality of Critters, I mean, it looked so good on a big screen too. So congratulations!
Thank
And
you.
I tried to. I think I applied too late for that Dev Day, so maybe next year I'll apply early enough and get to go.
Hopefully we do something again with them for that. But yeah, I mean, it's because you're used to watching on a screen like this, and you're like, yeah, this is cool for that. And then you're like, oh no, wait, the digital cinema print comes back, and you watch it. There was another film festival that played it in IMAX, and I was a little
Oh
worried.
wow!
Honestly. I was like, how is this going to hold up in IMAX? And I got to tell you, it was just incredible. So seeing it so big, it gives you hope that what these tools can actually create a real product that people can go watch and enjoy.
Well, I think this is a good segue because Critters, and you said it all the imagery was created with DALL-E, but it was actually animated and brought to film life with traditional filmmaking tools. So it was kind of like a combination of DALL-E and traditional filmmaking. And now with text to video with Sora, we're getting more into the Gen AI tools actually making the video itself. So I'd love to hear kind of your experience with Sora because you're one of the few. You have like the golden ticket, the Willy Wonka golden ticket, playing with it, and kind of where it's at, your experience, and where you see it's going too. Just because you've already been so knee deep in the evolution of it. But
So
that was a lot of questions piled into one.
I got you. I got you. My father was a notable artist in Soviet Russia. And in Soviet Russia, you were only allowed to paint socialist realism. And he didn't do that. And so, because of that, he was a bit of an enemy of the state. Certainly, the KGB had their eye on him and his whole group of artist friends. He ended up in jail. He got out. We basically left the Soviet Union, and so I'm an immigrant. Although I came to America when I was quite young, but I say that to the point of, his work now is hanging in famous museums all over the world. But if you walked up to me and gave me a piece of paper and asked me to draw a stick figure pony, it would look like a 5-year-old's. I am not that kind of artist, but I did inherit some sort of creativity from him. And I think it's come in the sense and sort of storytelling that I have always been into. I've always walked around with a camera since I was a young boy, filming everything. I mean, almost to like an American Beauty point where I'm just like constantly, I've like so much footage of just my life, which is kind of funny. But filming things, telling little stories, making short films where you're editing in camera, literally, okay, we got that shot. Now let's get this. Now we need the close up, but now the what, so I'm the type of creative that's always thought in motion and in sequences and in stories. And some of look the text to image tools are incredible, and I've certainly gotten a lot out of utilizing them. However, for me, the ability to think in motion and think in sequences and stories, that's where Sora truly excels. So I think Sora is really incredible because it thinks in X, Y, and Z space, and Z not just being depth, but also being time. And it's almost like when you create your prompt and you create your scene, it can somehow keep track of, say, the person or object doing the thing you asked it to do through some sort of space. And I obviously am not an engineer. I have no idea how it works, but it is for me the most useful AI tool I've ever used because obviously as a creative director, text to image is fantastic for communicating ideas and helping people see your vision. And heck, in some cases, you being used as some degree in finished work or a portion of that. But to actually be able to say, okay, here's a story in my head or a sequence or a scene, and being able to see that happen, even if it's not perfect, is kind of amazing.
That's very cool. And I do that with photos. Like I have so many photos. And one thing that a question that came to mind as you were saying that, have you either built your own model or have thought about it of loading your entire history of all the video and then working with that? Because that, I mean, as far as like a personal, or I forget what they call them, but the personal language models, that sounds like a very fun toy to play with all of your life's work of footage that you've captured since you were a little kid.
That is a really good idea, and I will look into that.
um, yeah, I think that aspect for creatives or even just anyone that has access to all of their IP and work and to play with it in real time, I think is a really interesting aspect of AI that's coming. But going back to Sora, so you kind of said some of the aspects that you really find it interesting. So what are some of the text to video prompts that you've used and how you've played with it, and what's been some of the most surprising aspects of working with Sora?
Creating clips just based off of text prompts is not the easiest thing in the world always. And as incredible as it is, and sometimes I feel like it kind of gets me instantly, sometimes the idea or concept is a little bit more complicated and does take some drilling down and wordsmithing to kind of get it to that point. But again, it not being perfect is kind of okay. I saw a bunch of people post online after my Sora clip came out. There was one bicycle repair shop in it, and I just saw people say like bicycle repike because it was spelled wrong. And they're like, this is ridiculous. Like, but to me, I come from a world now where, our bread and butter is very much brand storytelling and commercial work. And every frame of every commercial that we do is processed. Okay. Like it doesn't matter if it's filmed or CG or animated, every single frame, even if it's a person sitting on a couch talking to someone, there's a smudge on the wall, there's a hair on the couch. There's like, we live in this world where everything has been so perfected and so kind of glossy in a sense. And now also I think that people kind of expect that. And when things aren't kind of pristine, it becomes a bit of a separator between amateur work and professional work. And honestly, with some of the new tools that Adobe has been announcing and stuff. Like, it seems like that stuff is going to be extremely easy to do. There, comp artists and VFX masters that have been doing this stuff. I mean, a lot of this stuff is definitely becoming more democratized in the sense that you're going to be able to kind of do it on your own in some senses. I mean, obviously I haven't played with those tools from that video that they announced, but I'm curious, how good it really works. But again, it's like, even if we were to ultimately use Sora clips for finished client work, I don't need it to be 100% done out of the engine. Like, it's okay, because we can still finagle and adjust and add things and change and tweak as we would anyway, even if we went out and shot the actual shot with regular cameras and all that kind of stuff. So I'm okay with it not being a perfect thing, because it's pretty damn close. And again, this is the first iteration of what it could be. So I'm excited to also see what the future of it's going to be.
And I appreciate that you mentioned kind of all the other, I guess, tech stack involved with filmmaking and production of commercials with the VFX and all of the tools. How do you see Sora and text to video kind of fitting in the tech stack? Because in the Hard Fork interview, which I know we were talking about before we started recording, Paul Trillo mentioned that he kind of sees it as B-roll. How do you see it in your creativity workflow or in the tech stack as you're experimenting with it now?
I think in the future, the AI tools will be kind of our entire chest of things that we use, along with our traditional like NLEs and all that. Um, sure, it can be B-roll. I think immediately and in the very immediate future, it's going to be used to iterate and to basically create animatics, sell through ideas, brainstorm on things like that. And I think in general, AI tools have been really, really instrumental in allowing people to iterate at near finished level work. And that's been kind of the big shift that has happened over the last year or so, right? It's, you're able to really let people know what your vision is. And I think that that's part of this democratization of creativity that we're seeing. But yeah, in the immediate, I think it's that. I think it's being able to create an almost like shot by shot animatic. I mean, we already do that now for commercials, right? I mean, not only do we storyboard, but we cut animatics before we shoot anything. So everybody's on board. Everybody knows what they're going to get. There's no like major surprises when you get on set for a commercial of like, oh my gosh, I never thought that was going to happen. It's a little less exploratory in that way. But yeah, I mean, if you can basically cut your scene and say, hey, this is basically what we're going to make, I think that's the initial use of it. But I think as the tools continue to evolve, I do think there will be finished work elements. To Paul's point, yes, there will be B-roll applications. I would be curious if there's a world where, if I'm a filmmaker and I've made a film, let's say it's an indie film, and I don't have money for pickup shots, what if I uploaded a cut of my film that was graded and had all the kind of like tinkering to it to a data set and all my raw footage. And then I was able to generate potentially some sort of, pickup shots, B-roll, other like maybe special effect shots that we didn't have the budget for. I think there was the guy Cord at the Oscars this year who mentioned, why are we greenlighting one $200 million movie instead of 40 or 50 $4 million movies? Let me say that again. There was a guy Cord at the Oscars this year who was saying, why are we greenlighting one $200 million movie? Let's greenlight 50 $4 million movies instead. And I think that is the direction we're going to head. And the cool thing about that is we're going to get to hear more stories. More people are going to be able to tell more things. So there's kind of this like, oh, AI is going to take our jobs. But in my world also, I've seen a lot of budgets coming down, jobs just going away. So in a sense, it's like, well, I'd rather have a client take a chance on a job that is able to be done for a little less. That's more work. It might not be at the same level of finance, But if we get more of those projects and we're able to keep employing all of our designers and creatives, to me, that's actually kind of cool, because then a lot of my designers and people that work with us, they've been able to spend less time doing menial tasks and more time doing creative tasks, which I think is what everybody ultimately wants to do. Like, nobody gets into this saying like, oh gosh, I can't wait to rotoscope some stuff out today. This is gonna be awesome. So I think the more we're able to empower creatives to be able to flex their voice, I think the better.
Yeah, I agree. There was a gal I spoke with at South by, it was 2 years ago, and we were talking about text to image, and she's at an ad creative agency. And a lot of, especially when you're doing like social media ads, you're just creating hundreds of versions of the same thing, changing the colors. Like, no one thinks that that's fun. And if you can outsource that to AI or delegate it to AI, yeah, there's a lot of grunt work in production and advertising and creative.
For sure.
But yeah, I don't know if I told you, when I first got a demo of ChatGPT, it was in October of 2022, and I have a mini series in my head that I've been playing with. And the first time I ever played with it was the opening scene, and it captured my imagination. I was like, oh, maybe I'll have the first mini series ever done with AI. But I launched the podcast instead. But maybe as these tools evolve, I might actually get around to it.
I've taken the very traditional route of, I started as a creative, am still creative, obviously, but as you are a partner at an agency and you have the day in day out of work, it's just your perspective and your focus has changed just naturally, right? And you do have to think about bottom line and other things more. It's just like a part of what happens. And since I've gotten Sora, I will say that I feel this genuine childlike creativity kind of reawakened in me, where I'm getting to explore ideas that have just been sitting in a vault, because who's going to give me the money or resources to kind of like explore some stupid ideas that I had. But it's so fun and invigorating to do it, and you kind of make something that's like either real or real-ish, but it's you can get your idea out onto paper, so to speak. And that's part of what's been really fun, and why I've fully updated my sleeping schedule into processing around rendering Sora clips and putting together little projects.
I love that. Well, and I saw an interesting interview with Android Jones and Sam Altman. It was actually at Burning Man 2022. We're going to do a blog post on it. And in terms, because you mentioned the evolution of AI, what Sam Altman said in that discussion is we're soon just going to be able to talk to computers and in real time have it render what we're thinking. And it reminded me of Westworld season 4. Did you happen to see that by any chance?
I did not even realize it went up to season 4.
Yeah,
Really?
you have to go
Is it
through
still
season 2 to
going?
make it worth
Is it
it.
still
No,
going?
season 4 was the last one. Uh,
I'm behind on a
but
few TV shows. I gotta really.
well, the main character is a game maker, and she literally just speaks, and like these holograms come up for the gameplay, and that's how as Sam Altman was saying, we're going to speak and have things rendered in real time, kind of how I imagine it, maybe in 2D, but with all of this spatial computing, we might see that in 3D too. So I think it's only going to get the play box and that childlike wonder. These tools are just going to go crazy with their capabilities. I think it's only going to get wilder on what we
It
can
is
do and
wild.
in real time. Yeah.
It is wild. Fun fact, the original 1973 Westworld film is the first film ever in movie history that had a heads up display, or a HUD, of a robot's perspective. So the robots in that movie, there's some scenes where you can kind of see through their POV, and that was the first time it ever been done in cinema, which is pretty fun.
I did not know that, but I
The
will
movie
have
is
to go back
extremely
and watch
cheesy.
that film.
The movie is very cheesy. It is nothing like the HBO masterwork, but I mean, it's a masterwork in its own way, and obviously set the tone for that whole franchise and series to go. So
Yeah, very cool. Well, one thing I wanted to make sure that we talked about is one kind of where Sora is at as a research tool. And something that you said that's, I think, really interesting is that Native Foreign has set up a whole AI labs as an experimental playground too, or sandbox. And that your reasoning is like, you really just want to understand the tools and where it's going. So you guys are going all in. So I'd love to kind of hear, your thoughts on how you're experimenting, researching, and playing with it at Native Foreign.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So we are a, creative agency production company that deals mostly with brands, but also entertainment. I mean, we do Netflix and Amazon titles and work and all that kind of stuff. But I think as we've been playing with these AI tools, we see how incredible the future looks with integrating this stuff into our pipeline. So we've started an entire AI labs division where we have a fund and we have projects that we're doing, and some of them are client work, and we've had some clients that are pretty open and really cool about, hey, like, we're going to take a chance on something, and we understand that it's this kind of nascent space, but let's see what happens if we try something out. So the interesting thing is we've had this vision for creating IP and launching IP, and it's taking a little longer than we wanted it to. However, really right now with the AI tools, we see quite an opportunity to actually jumpstart that a bit and be able to create more. And we saw it with Critters that we were actually able to create a true piece of IP. And, you know, we have other plans for that as well. And we have other projects as well. So there's kind of this very encouraging space we wanted to create within our shop that is saying, hey, we are next gen creatives and we are embracing the tools and tech that is becoming available, and we're trying out all sorts of stuff, and some of them might be huge wins and some of them might be flops, but it's okay to fail and it's okay to create and see what's new. I did another project I've been wanting to do for a long time. Was I'm a big Anton Chekhov fan, and there's a short story he wrote called The Kiss. And The Kiss is about this kind of lowly infantry army military man that goes to a party at this general's mansion. And this is, 19th century Russian literature. And he's a bit of a loner. And whereas the party is kind of going on, he wanders off into some dark hallways and he stumbles upon this woman. And the woman comes up to him and grabs him and gives him a kiss because she thinks it's someone else. She realizes it's not the person she thought. She runs away. He's like in love. He couldn't really make out her face in the darkness, so he didn't know who she was. He goes down the hallways. He tries to find her, can't find her. And then, in very traditional, like Russian literature manner, this like kind of totally destroys his life, and he's just obsessed with this person that he kissed once randomly in a dark room at a party, and he just dies like this old lonely man. So I had used ChatGPT to basically help me rewrite the short story into first person prose so it could be VO, and then of course I obviously tweaked it and workshopped it. I also find, I am Russian Ukrainian and I speak it, but my writing is not great. Like, I'll just admit, I grew up here, so I'm very conversational, but I'm not like writing any Dostoevsky anytime soon. So then I find also chat is much better at translating things than like a traditional Google method. So then it actually helped me translate the prose that I wrote and rewrote with chat into Russian, and then got that recorded as VO. And then for that one, I actually used a mixture of Dolly and Runway. So Runway Gen 2, which is basically kind of bringing motion to life for images, right? And so I was creating the looks of the images that I wanted, and then I was using Runway to kind of bring this story to life. And there's a lot of Runway trailers out right now. A lot of people are playing around with it, and it's cool to see people bringing all sorts of ideas to life. But that was another one where it's just, there's no aim, there's no particular goal other than I've been wanting to make this short for a long time. But again, like, how am I going to shoot a period piece in Russia that's just a short film that has no purpose other than just existing? And what I did was I created this film. It's about 2 minutes long, and I called it the Kiss 1.0 because I very decidedly made the plan to keep updating the same film over and over and over again. And then I'll make a Kiss 2.0 and a Kiss 3.0 with different tools and tools as they evolve. And then in the end, I'll have them all like kind of playing at the same time on a big wall. And you can kind of walk from one to the other. And in some senses, it'll be a test of time of how the AI tools have come about, but also I think it's interesting to see how AI influences creativity and how creatives work with AI and how different creatives interpret the tools in different ways. I mean, just like an artist, same paintbrushes, same paints, and the wildly different results. And I think that's kind of fascinating.
I love this, and I can't wait to see it. I don't know if it's something that we can embed with this interview, or if it hasn't been
Yes,
released
yeah,
yet.
it's up on our AI labs. It's there. Yeah, we finished
Okay,
it at the very
perfect.
end of last year, so I definitely think at some point soon there should be Kiss 2.0 with some sort of other text to video tools integrated for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Um, and I love that you're gonna do different versions of it with the different tools. So very, very cool. And since you did mention experimenting with different text to video tools, and you mentioned Runway, can you kind of walk us through the differences between the text to video players right now, and maybe a strength of Sora over the other ones, or if the other ones have strengths that Sora might not have?
Well, I mean, Sora is just right now anyway. It's text to video, so it's just that. Like you have to type in words, and it's incredible and it's incredibly powerful and amazing, as I've already endorsed said. But Runway has been awesome as well. Gen 1 and Gen 2 are really interesting tools. Gen 1 is allows you to upload video and like change the looks of it, which is kind of fun and exploratory. And Gen 2 brings motion to stills. So that's really useful if you have a very specific look in mind. I think the limitations, anyway, as of right now, as of the time of this interview, is you got 4 seconds, and really only like the first couple seconds look kind of good, and then kind of devolves. So it's limiting in that way, but certainly been really helpful to experiment and get my hands, involved in AI and stuff. And Pika is really cool too. Similar that they have text to video. It is obviously trained on different data than Runway. I mean, the look and vibe of Pika is definitely different. And I'll say that Pika is kind of developing some other niche things that I think are really interesting. There's a sound effects generator where you upload a clip and it will create sound design around that, which right now is also still text input and text based. It'll be really cool if that gets to a point where you just like upload a clip, say of a sword fight, and then it can actually look at your clip and be like ching 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 ching, like so that again, like I do think the future of creativity is us sitting and with our creative brains and thinking about things and being like, oh well, I use this for this, and I love the way this sound designer works, and I love so like kind of creating your own little suite of new tools that are not just post tools but also production tools that you're using from wherever you are.
That's very cool. I feel like I saw a demo on Instagram where it was all in one tool where the sound effects were added. I probably saved it, so I'll have to find it. And I'll also mention all of the links and stuff that we are talking about. We'll be sure to link on the dedicated blog post that accompanies this interview as well. And since you mentioned training, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about some of the concerns related to some of these models, on how they've been trained, making sure that they're commercially safe from, especially on a client perspective, and just like taking care of all stakeholders, especially artists, you know, who may or may not have consented to the models, depending on which ones that we're talking about. So how do you think about that when you're in conversation, either in your labs or with your clients, as you're dipping your toes or and all the experimenting with AI in your AI labs?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we're in a very nascent stage of all of this. And I think there are just some things that any client that's working with stuff needs to understand, which is like, hey, there are bigger things at play here than just us. We are not developing the AI technology on our end, but we have gotten really good at knowing how to use it and the workarounds and kind of the best ways forward with the AI storytelling. But certainly, in the same way that you could Photoshop Mickey Mouse going down, Times Square on a skateboard or whatever, maybe I guess if the tools do accidentally make something, I do think it's kind of your responsibility to be like, oh, well, let's not do that because that is a clear rip off of something. How did that get through? Say if you made something in Mid Journey or whatever. But yeah, I mean, as far as being utilized as final assets, I think that we need to go through all those steps still. And I'm sure every major player is doing the most they can because I'm sure they all want to be able to use this as enterprise solutions.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I guess, can you expand on what you mean by what you just said about going through all of the solutions? Is because I could understand that from two perspectives: of one, training their own models and creating the data, which I think that would be really hard, or working with commercially safe entities like Adobe, like everyone's
Yeah.
anything that comes from their Adobe Firefly, they've
Yeah.
consented and they get compensation and that type of thing. So yeah, can you just expand on what you meant by that?
I think we're heading in that world where we are going to, you know, it's there's kind of a funny thing with some of the stock libraries too. I think it's going to be, well, like who were you trained on? Like what was your tech trained on, and were we trained on like a really cool stock library, like like a film supply or something? It's like, oh well, we have film supply, and so we have like cool artists and filmmakers that are making amazing visuals, and so our stuff is going to look cooler because it's trained on that type of data. Obviously, I can't speak to what's being used to train. I try to do my own due diligence of, hey, let's make sure that we're not creating something that looks like something else and we're trying to, you know, safeguard creativity. But yeah, I mean, it is still very new. So I'm sure things are going to happen. Like, if you make something now, is it grandfathered in somehow? If, as long as there's nothing that's provable, I mean, who knows? So we're definitely in this kind of interesting world of sheer creative power, kind of being able to flex, and then I think everything else is going to kind of have to catch up.
Well, I think one thing that's interesting, and I'm slightly obsessed with the Sam Altman and Android Jones interviews, because he actually did two so far, 15 months apart. And in the first interview, Android Jones actually told Sam Altman on stage at Burning Man that he considered if this was a Hitler moment and he should put his life at risk and kill Sam Altman on stage. And then afterwards is like, no, you're safe. But he really was this voice of really all of the concerns for artists. And then 15 months later, they got back in stage. I think it was in Oakland. It was either Vegas or Oakland. And had another conversation. And in that time frame, Sam Altman's our Android Jones barn with all of his life's work had burnt down. So he had a whole different energy about life in the world. But it was the conversation shifted more to artists being part of the conversation, and again, Android Jones kind of representing the what artists want. And then at the end, Sam was like, "Give me 15 more months, and we'll get back on stage." So I say this because in Sora, the on the website, openai.com/Sora, that they are working with creatives like you and policymakers before they're releasing it more widely to get artist feedback about their concerns. So I'm curious, like, what would be your wish list for these tools to make it as mutually beneficial for all stakeholders, like you as using them and the artists that are training the data, and just all stakeholders?
For me, it's all about, is it a pro tool or not? So a lot of the feedback I've been has been in that realm and regard of like, here's what I need for me to use it as a pro tool in our various kind of situations. And I think as an agency owner, I would like to know that, hey, this is good to use. I think that is the big stuff. And I think certainly Adobe is making strides to kind of plant that flag and say, hey, the Firefly stuff is good to use. And I think it's in everyone's best interest that's building technology in this space that they got to kind of do that if they want it to be a pro tool. Now, if they don't want it to be a pro tool, then maybe it's not as pertinent.
Hmm. Yeah, that's fair. And one thing too, I just have to plug every time is, since you mentioned Adobe, that anyone who's listened to the show knows that I'm a big fan of the Content Authenticity Initiative, and I'm a member, and they have the C2PA standard, which is metadata that goes into any media file for the creators if they want to show that, especially in journalism. It's super important. And then for consumers to have the option, or just who's ever consuming the content, to dig in deeper to see if any media file has been touched or not touched by AI. And on OpenAI's website, that they're going to integrate the C2PA standard in, I think, one of the upcoming models of Sora. So that's really great, just in the standard getting more widely adopted. So we all can understand what's been touched by AI or what's not. So I just wanted to give a plug, and I don't think it's in the current one yet.
I think it's important because in what are those stats that everyone throws around that in the next 10 years, 90% of every image and video is going to be AI generated. So I think there will be a real value to understanding and knowing when something is AI or not.
Yeah, and I've actually seen a few articles. It's like, especially with written text, that it's almost like it's already everywhere. That almost every text, you should almost assume that it's been touched by AI. And I say that even pre chat GPT and the Gen AI tools, you already had all of the squiggly lines saying when you've misspelled words and
Right.
stuff. And it's almost in everyone's toolkit already.
Yeah, of course. I mean, AI in some sense has been around for a while. I mean, if you've used a clone stamp in Adobe Photoshop, like you've been using AI for 20 years. So you have to draw the line somewhere, I guess, but where is that drawn? Where is the kind of like, well, it is if it's not, and it is if it is. So, yeah, but yes, I'm also for that. And I think that in the future, it'll be really valuable to know when something was like really filmed or really real, I guess.
Yeah, and it definitely has a lot of implications. I think in the creative space, there's a lot more leeway in the tools and the toolkits. And I've heard arguments where some creatives are like, I don't need to tell you if I've used Photoshop or AI. It's my prerogative to decide what tools I use, which I respect that opinion. And from a photo or from a journalistic perspective, we want to know. And like the Princess Kate issue, like raised the concerns of like manipulation and how it's of public interest and whatnot. Um, so I want to go back to the hard fork episode because I thought they asked a pretty thought provoking question to the filmmaker Paul Trillo. So I'm going to read what they asked him from the transcript and get your feedback for this. So, and I don't know if it was Casey or Kevin, but so I wonder if you could speak to this idea of OpenAI using artists and filmmakers to try to convince a skeptical public that all this stuff is just going to be good and it's going to enhance creativity and that's not going to replace anyone's jobs while actually having a very different strategy behind the scenes. And then Paul's answer is, I'll give you a second to think about it. Sure, I think it's a very fascinating point and something that I grapple with all the time because I love to do it the traditional way. I still love to employ people. But then the other side of me is playing with all this new tech. And I'm like, am I just some sort of pawn in this great master plan of AGI? But what's the opposite of this? Is that you don't want artists involved in the research process. So I'm curious, since you're one of the lucky artists who do get to play with Sora, kind of your reaction or your thoughts to this question and interview piece.
Well, first of all, shout out to Paul. The dude's a beast. He's incredible. I will say that I don't think it's that nefarious. I just know the people, and like, I don't think anyone's like, I think that you could actually tell an interesting difference. And I think that they curated the artists that they put out pretty nicely, because I think again you can see the tool in different hands and how different creatives made stuff. You know, Paul versus Shy Kids versus myself and Josephine Don. Like everybody had kind of pretty different looking stuff, and certainly the montage that I put together does maybe think about like what future agency work looks like. I do have several kind of more products in mind and other storytelling kind of things. I have like a film noir in mind and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I do think you can see the difference. And I say this in the sense that the initial clips that they put out, right, they got a very big buzz and a very big momentum because they are incredible. And as great as those clips are, when they opened it up to these artists and get the artist creative perspective on utilizing the same tool, I mean, some of the results were like so outstandingly different. And I think maybe that was an aha moment for a lot of people of like, oh wow, well here's the tool, which is awesome, and here's the tool placed in the hands of creatives. And I think it's smart of them to get creatives involved because it's different sides of the brain, right? And creatives are just, they might not know this, but they're going to push the tools and the things that the brilliant engineers made in a way that maybe they didn't think about. So I think it's like this perfect marriage of both sides of the brain by doing something like that. And so I don't think it's like a pawn thing. I just think it's like, well, here's what we've made, and how's the world going to react to it, and this is like a sneak peek or a taste of that, and I think it's exciting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your perspective. Yeah, I think, I appreciate, I go back to the Sam Altman and Android Jones interview, that he's willing to work with creatives to make it mutually beneficial, and that they're working with creatives like you. I think it will come down to the execution and making sure that they follow through. So we'll see as they roll it out more what they do on that front. I'm
We'll
cautiously
see.
optimistic,
We'll
but I'm
see. I'm along for the ride like everyone else.
yeah, I'm very excited about what's going to happen too. And I guess since I'm actually I have a social media agency too, and consulting with some other agencies who want to start integrating AI for some other creative agencies who might just either be cautious or haven't started playing with it or dipping their toes. What would be like some of like your advice, since you've like fully dove into the deep end and embraced all things AI? What would you say to other like agency owners in the industry?
Just try it. Honestly, the people that I talk to that are the most afraid of the tools, I feel more times than not have not really used them. I think if you start using the tools, you're going to see like, oh, okay, actually, we still need all these creatives and all this creative to do the things we do. So just try it and don't panic.
That's fair. Um, Well, I feel like we could go on, and I could hear you talk about all of your ideas and or ideas that you've had boxed up and ready to come out, and excited to see what you do with them. Is there anything that you want to plug about Native Foreign or other projects in the pipeline before we wrap up the interview?
Helen, it's been really good talking to you. I'd love to come back on when some of these other Sora based clips and things are able to be released and, talk through the thinking on some of those. I will just say, if anyone out there that's listening wants to engage with a very forward thinking agency that is thinking about next gen creative and next gen filmmaking, check out Native Foreign, nativeforeign.tv, and nativeforeign.ai is our AI labs. And we're in sunny Los Angeles making things happen over here.
One thing that I like to ask all of my guests is if you want our viewers and listeners to remember one thing, what's that one thing that you want to want them to walk away with from today's conversation?
I think that the paradigm shift is underway. And I think that it is a wise choice to get involved with next gen tools and at least be aware of what's happening with them and start playing around with them, because this is the direction things are headed. I mean, at a certain point, we could have just said, hey, you know what? Boat travel is good and takes 2 months to cross the Atlantic. That's fine by me. Let's just stop here. So technology keeps advancing. It is the way things go. And this is the newest, coolest stuff that's happening. And I think there's a real benefit to staying ahead of the curve on the AI storytelling tools that are available.
I couldn't agree, and I play with all of them for the same reason. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. So thank you so much, Nick, for sharing your time and insights and all the fun that you've got to have playing with Sora. And I'm so excited when it's released for everyone to dip my toes into it too. So thank you again.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Creativity Squared. Talk soon.
Thank you for spending some time with us today. We're just getting started and would love your support. Subscribe to Creativity Squared on your preferred podcast platform and leave a review. It really helps. And I'd love to hear your feedback. What topics are you thinking about and want to dive into more? I invite you to visit creativitysquared.com to let me know. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our free weekly newsletter so you can easily stay on top of all the latest news at the intersection of AI and creativity. Because it's so important to support artists, 10% of all revenue Creativity Squared generates will go to ArtsWave, a nationally recognized nonprofit that supports over 100 arts organizations. Become a premium newsletter subscriber or leave a tip on the website to support this project and ArtsWave. And premium newsletter subscribers will receive NFTs of episode cover art and more extras to say thank you for helping bring my dream to life. And a big thank you to everyone who's offered their time, energy, and encouragement and support so far. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. This show is produced and made possible by the team at Play Audio Agency. Until next week, keep creating.